Brianne of Tarth.
You know her?
You're with Brianne of fucking Tarth.
Well, not with her yet. But I see the way she looks at me.
Season 7, Episode 6 was another incredible episode, jam-packed with Easter eggs, callbacks, history and lore, and foreshadowing. So let's do this. The very first shot of the episode transitions from fire to wind, two signs of magic. And we see wind again right before the bear attacks. The wind is words of dead people. It's beautiful. Jon tries to give Jorah back his house's ancestral Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, but Jorah denies it. This shows us that he has still not forgiven himself for selling poachers as slaves.
I brought shame into my house. I broke my father's heart. I've forfeited the right to claim this sword.
He's been wrestling with this guilt since Season 1.
He still is. Man of great honor. He deserved a better son, and I betrayed him.
We also get a shout out to R plus L equals J.
You don't look much like him.
Who's that?
Your father. I'm not his son.
As well as a sign that Jon might eventually get the sword Dawn, even though only someone from House Dane is supposed to wield it.
And it's been in your family for centuries. It's not right for me to have it.
The times are changing, for better. Old rules no longer apply.
The rules were wrong.
This scene closely resembles the River Run scene back in Season 6, Episode 7, when Brienne went to give Jaime back the Valyrian steel sword Oathkeeper, but Jaime says, "It's yours."
It's yours.
It's yours.
It will always be yours.
And it's worth noting that 13 people headed north, resembling the legend of the last hero who traveled north with 12 companions, who died, one by one. There are 13 here in this shot, and there are 12 here in this shot, but one dude already got mauled by that polar bear. So it makes you wonder, are events replaying, or is the lore of the last hero coming true for the first time? And let's have fun with the 7 heroes theory. Jon, the father, serves justice.
But we avenged them. I want you to know that every mutineer found justice.
Jorah, the mother, fighting for the mother of dragons. Sandor, the warrior. Gendry, the smith. Thoros, the crone. Tormund, the maiden, fighting for the maiden, Brienne of Tarth. And the stranger, Death, Lord Beric Dondarrion. Speaking of Beric, Beric's living his 7th life.
This one's been killed 6 times. You don't hear him bitching about it.
7 is an important number. Will be interesting to see if he gives up his life to someone else, like he does in the books to raise Lady Stoneheart, before experiencing the true death.
Careful, Beric. You lost your priest. This is your last life.
Sandor tells Tormund that he hates him because of his hair color,
Gingers I hate.
which is a clear shout out to the Sand theory. Sandor and Sansa reconnecting as lovers, or more likely, Sandor going down swinging to protect his little bird. And Tormund points out that Sandor is sad, not mean.
I don't think you're truly mean. You have sad eyes.
This is a common theme among many of the true heroes in the story. Bran notes that the children of the forest, the singers, sang sad songs, whereas humans would seek revenge. And Rhaegar also gravitated towards sad songs. Rhaegar did not see everything clearly, but he saw the endgame, or at least a vision of what it might be. And he saw doom. But he made moves to prevent that. I'll expand on this in a separate video. The Arrowhead Mountain is peculiar. Reminds me of a volcano, like Valyria, where the doom happened, and the volcano of Dragonstone. And it's pretty cool how Sandor, the dude who has spent his life taking orders from scumbags, is now leading people. But everything isn't gravy for Sandor. He's still afraid of fire. He froze when the bear attacked and could not stand up to help Thoros, who had just saved his life. And later on, he turns away from Thoros' burning body on the island. To get his mind off it, he walks away. Throws a rock, and this ends up leading to the Frozen Lake battle. But let's quickly give Thoros a tribute. If you didn't know, Thoros is one of the most legit fighters in the realms. He beat Sandor twice off-screen in melees, although we need to take that with a grain of salt, since he would light his swords on fire and Sandor's afraid of fire. But Thoros was the first through the breach at the Siege of Pike, so Jorah talks about it in this episode.
The Ironborn thought you were some kind of god when you were waving that flaming sword.
But it's also worth noting that Ser Jorah is from the north. He follows the old gods. Knighthood is something that Southerners do. It's related to the faith of the Seven, not the old gods. That's why Ned is not Sir Ned. But some Northerners get knighted, like Jorah for his bravery at Pike, following in and battling alongside Thoros of Myr. When they captured the White, I learned a few things that I had been assuming incorrectly for years. All but one of the Whites died when the White Walker died, showing us that their residual souls can be connected to the White Walkers, not just the Night King. And presumably, that implies that the White Walkers have necromancy powers as well.
Maybe he was the one who turned them.
We can go for the walkers. Maybe we'll stand a chance.
So the key to fighting them is to take out the White Walkers, but Beric goes a step further.
Killed him. He turned them all.
Previously, I thought that only fire killed Whites and Dragonglass killed White Walkers, but we learned that Dragonglass also works on Whites. And I guess the one White that didn't die must have been connected to another White Walker. Maybe he was controlled by the Night King. The Night King seemed to wait around for the dragons to show up before he got involved, so I would not be surprised if most of the events that happened in this episode were intentional if they were expected, so that he could acquire a dragon for a very specific reason. After all, he's a Greenseer. He can see the past and the present, and possibly an unwritten future. So let's talk about Viserion. Viserion's death was heartbreaking. We saw him explode into fire because he's fire made flesh, and Drogon was screeching in sorrow for his fallen brother. So sad. And 7 hells to everyone who spoiled that for me and others in the comments section over the past few months. It blows my mind that anyone thinks that's even remotely acceptable. If that's your thing, please stay away from me and my friends. Go comment on other videos where people put spoilers in the titles and the thumbnails, since any creator that does that appears not to care about common decency either. Alright, it's worth noting that Viserion was the first to hatch, and the first to die. And since I had known about the spoiler ahead of time, I couldn't in good conscience release this in the last couple months, but I'll upload a video later this week about the difference between ice dragons and white dragons. So the thing is, ice dragons, at least in a separate standalone short story which supposedly takes place in a different world, they're an entirely separate species. Viserion is now a white dragon, not an ice dragon. He's a dead, resurrected dragon. He may end up shooting ice, but if he shoots fire, that would be much more valuable to the Night King to get past the wall, because I don't buy the theory that the ocean freezes and allows the dead army to walk around it. That just doesn't make sense. It would basically negate the whole purpose of the wall having magic in it. Alright, so Jon and the Night King had a really cool moment. This was a callback to Hardhome. And Dan and Dave referred to Benjen as Cold Hands several times in the post-episode discussion. I've always thought of Benjen as Cold Hands. It just makes sense. But George has supposedly said that in the books, Cold Hands is not Benjen. I think he's lying, but we'll have to wait to find out. But do you think that Benjen is dead, or will he come back as a white? And will we see Hodor or Summer as whites? And check this dude out. He looked a lot like the White Walker in the cave painting, bald with a beard. Rhaegal is flying around as Jon returns to the wall, which might be a sign of them having a bond. Jon might be a dragon rider sooner than later. And the coolest part of the entire episode for me was how Jon woke up and his first words.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Jon's a man, and she saw the wounds on his chest, so let's expect her to follow up on that in the season finale. It's going to be interesting, because her new enemy is the dead army, yet the guy she's fallen in love with is a dead dude. We get a couple references to the age-old debate over whether or not the gods are real or not.
We both serve the same lord. I serve the North.
The North didn't raise you from the dead.
The Lord of Light never spoke to me.
And if they are, whether or not they're good or bad.
The Lord I've ever met's been a cunt. Don't see why the Lord of Light should be any different.
Personally, I'm with Syrio Forel.
There is only one God, and his name is Death.
And as I've been contemplating the various forms of magics lately, and seeing similarities between ice magic and fire magic, I've come to see the terms Valar Morghulis and Valar Dohaeris differently. All men must die, all men must serve, and all magic seems to be related to life force, the lives of the living, and at other times, death. Valar Dohaeris.
So what are you fighting for?
Life. Death is the enemy.
But I'm going to have to disagree.
But we all die.
Bloodraven told Bran not to fear the darkness, so let's not be surprised if most of the heroes die before the curtains fall on Season 8. We were reminded of themes like perspective.
You've never been down south.
I've been to Winterfell.
That's the North.
And Jon still refers to them as wildlings, even though that's a derogatory term. They refer to themselves as the Free Folk, and it's pretty wild that one of the most badass Free Folk, Tormund Giantsbane, is questioning whether the lives that were lost were worth not bending the knee.
Mansraider was a brave man. The king beyond the wall never bent the knee. How many of his people died for his pride?
Speaking of bending the knee,
I'd bend the knee, but...
This episode referenced breaking the wheel, creating a new future several times.
The rules were wrong.
If we want to create a new and better world, I'm not sure deceit and mass murder is the best way to start.
This topic touches on a few things.
You say you can't have children.
And possibly a new style of government.
But there are other ways of choosing a successor.
Elections like the Night's Watch, the Ironborn, the North in a sense under Jon, the Dothraki in a way, and various other versions of elections in the Free Cities. The most important part, though...
But the world you want to build doesn't get built all at once. Probably not in a single lifetime.
Dany claims that Tyrion...
You're not a hero.
Which I completely disagree with. Check out the Battle of the Blackwater video if you need proof. But it's ironic since Dany has acted as a hero the past 2 episodes. And her rebuttal to having a temper was pretty ironic too.
And you have been known to lose your temper from time to time, as all great leaders do.
When have I lost my temper? That was necessary.
You can be saying something that's true, but saying it with a temper.
One could be forgiven for thinking you're taking your family's side in this
But any one of them could have found your heart and ended you.
You've been thinking about my death quite a bit, haven't you? Perhaps if you planned for the short term, we wouldn't have lost Dawn in Highgarden. You want to know who sits on the Iron Throne after I'm dead?
I think that Dany's temper stems from her bond to Drogon. I think it leaves an imprint on her, just like skin changing does to wargs, and possibly even face changing does to faceless men. Do you think Arya may have adopted some of the insane characteristics of the people whose faces she wore? Maybe she should have trained at the House of Black and White a little bit longer. And we also touch on war here. At this point, Dany is still eyeing up the Iron Throne, but we know from her vision back in the day that she'll most likely never touch the throne. But in the meantime, we should expect Dany to
go with 2 armies, we'll go with 3 dragons.
In hopes of unifying the realms against a common enemy, the Night King. But does anyone really think that this story, which is centered around the horrors of war, is going to end by defeating the Night King and the Dead Army in war?
We are going to destroy the Night King and his army.
I don't. There was probably a pact the first time around that the White Walkers retreated to the lands of Always Winter, and the island that the 7 heroes fought on in this episode might foreshadow the Isle of Faces, where the children and the humans made a pact to end their own war thousands of years ago, and where a new pact might be made with the White Walkers. Alright, now let's look at Death, otherwise known as the Stranger, No One, or Arya Stark. What a psycho! I still think we're going to get a delayed payoff on the Lannister soldier scene. I bet she uses one of their faces in the finale or in Season 8. She's totally mistaken about Sansa. Of course Sansa had to write that letter, and Sansa's absolutely right. Arya never would have survived in King's Landing. She wears a heart on her sleeve, which I like in certain ways, just like her dad, but most likely she would have said or done something and gotten killed. On the other hand, she may have killed Joffrey first. Sansa had a chance and she did not capitalize. Sansa was loyal to Jon, which is pretty cool.
By the time Jon comes back, he'll have no army left.
I've swung a complete 180 on her, from episode 1 to episode 6. I'm officially on Team Sansa now. There's been a theory for a while that Arya was really the waif, that the waif killed her that night in the dark. I never bought it, but now we know for sure that this is really Arya, because she mentions killing the last person who asked her questions.
The Game of Faces didn't turn out so well for the last person who asked me questions.
We're finally getting an Oathkeeper plot. In the books, Lady Stoneheart pits Brienne between her oath to the Starks and her love for Jaime. Littlefinger is setting this up between Arya and Sansa.
She's sworn to protect both of Catelyn Stark's girls.
I swore an oath to protect you and your sister.
But this may just be a decoy, because Lady Sandra just sent Brienne to King's Landing, so she's not even around anymore. And Sandor's going to King's Landing too, so it's going to be pretty cool if Brienne and Sandor run into each other, especially since Sandor just spoke to Tormund about her. And we'll probably get teased with Clegane Bowl. And here's a cool Easter egg. Some people think that Winterfell's walls are magical, sort of like the Great Wall, since Bran the Builder supposedly built both.
This is the safest place for me.
Here are 2 shoutouts to the theory that Sansa will be queen when it's all said and done.
I will not set foot in King's Landing while Cersei Lannister is queen.
You wanted to be a queen.
Side by side with their first husband, Tyrion, beginning a transition to some sort of democracy and capitalism. And last but not least, we got a lot of evidence to support the theory that Jon and Dany are falling in love. Tyrion mentioned it. And Dany gave Jon a bunch of worried and loving looks during the Frozen Lake battle. She waits for him at the wall, for 19 seconds to be specific, and then they bond on the boat. Jon calls her his queen, but pretty soon, he might be doing more than just bending to her. Does anyone think that Jon and Dany will become the new Night Queen and Night King? Dany and her big spine wore white in this episode. And Davos seemed to buy this theory.
King Snore, King Snore, King Snore.
I'm on Team Davos. From Flea Bottom to the Iron Throne, baby.